So a few weeks back, I was at the crag and I see a group of brand new climbers doing their first outdoor sport lead. And I was really psyched to see beginners trying out outdoor climbing on real rock for the first time. I was almost jealous of them because I remember that period of time in my climbing where everything was new and everything was exciting and the results came really thick and fast, and it was just nice to see. As I approached them to squeeze past them, I asked them how they were getting on, and to my surprise, the look in their face was just one of sheer terror. I could tell that they didn't feel safe, they didn't feel secure, they felt overwhelmed, they were stressed, they were not having a good time. And I could really empathise with these guys because whilst my climbing journey has been wonderful, it has not been without struggles, adversity, and most notably, fear. A year or 18 months ago, I was standing in the exact same spot, feeling the exact same feelings they were, and I really felt for them.
I can't climb this at all. Just so terrified.
So what I think had happened, in fact, I pretty much know this happened, is they had gone to the crag with the guidebook, find the lowest graded climb there and headed straight for that. And that's to do their first outdoor lead. And that is logical and sensible, right? But what they experienced, and this happened to me as well, was quite awkward climbing, a little bit of a sandbagged grade, big spaces between the bolts and unnerving ledges that you could fall onto. Not a good experience at all for your first time on the sharp end. And this made me really sad because these are people who are wanting to get into this amazing sport and their experience is bad and scary, and I worry that this is common for lots and lots of people who want to try leading for the first time, and it puts them off and they have a tendency to just quit because it's just too much for them.
Yeah, it's too hard.
That's just not a good place for the sport to be. So what is the problem here? How do we ensure that people who are leading outdoors on real rock for the first time have a good experience in their first couple of months of climbing and stick with the sport? I want to say what I feel from the perspective of someone who has recently graduated from being a beginner, so I still remember what these guys were going through really vividly. So this is a climbing bolt and hanger. This part's the bolt and that part's the hanger. And when you put this into the wall, this expands and gets stuck in the wall. And this part here you clip with your carabiner on your quick draw. Simple stuff. So on average, there's one of these every 2 meters on the route. This hanger and this bolt combination probably cost about £7. Say you have 100 routes at the crag and they're about 20 meters in length. That means you need 10 bolts and hangers per route. So if you have 100 routes, that's 1,000 bolts and hangers. So at £7 each, well, that's £7,000 to bolt the crag. And the anchors, they're expensive as well. Let's add on another £3,000. So in the ballpark of like £10,000 to bolt a crag. That's a lot of money. If it was my money, I'd want to bolt the crag so it's totally safe and fun, but I'd try to use a limited number of these in the process. The person who's bolting the crag is most likely a semi-decent climber. They find this really easy line and they start bolting it, and there's easy sections, so they just elect not to put a bolt there. Let's save the bolts for areas on the harder climbs where people are actually going to fall. That makes sense, right? Okay, well, let's look at what that looks like in practice on the wall from the perspective of someone who's maybe not the most confident leader and who's doing a nice easy grade. All right, I've changed up my hangboard routine again. This time I'm doing repeaters, which is like a very, very standard protocol that I think most pro climbers will do repeaters at some point. I do 3 sets of 3 reps. And each rep is 7 seconds long with a 3-second rest. And I'm just going to use the 20mm edge and the half crimp position. Might look like absolutely nothing, but that is absolutely savage. Having just 3 seconds rest in between each rep is so brutal. Again, 1 minute rest, and then we repeat the same for 3-finger drag. So I'm performing these on my fictitious megalith, which is mounted to the doorway mount. This doorway mount can be removed from the door frame and reinstalled on the door frame in under 30 seconds. No tools required. It's just got some knobs at the back that you twist. It comes off and it doesn't leave any marks on your door frame. That is key. If you live in a rented accommodation where you can't keep this up all the time, you need to put it on and off, and you cannot afford to leave marks on your door frame, this is the hangboard doorway mount for you. If you buy the fictitious hangboard and the doorway mount together, they'll mount it for you and you'll get 20% off your order. I use the megalith, which has the most selection of edges, and this big jug at the top for pull-ups. But they also have a monolith, which is quite similar, but has slightly less edges available. And they also have the hangboard 3.0, which is the most simplistic one. It just has rails here, 20, 25, you've got 30 and 15, and a top jug for pull-ups. This kit arrives to you flat packed, and you can assemble it in 5 minutes. All you need is a screwdriver, no drilling required. And as you can see, it really is absolutely bomber. It doesn't move. So check out Frictitious if you want to get yourself a hangboard and a doorway mount. Get them both together, you get 20% off the entire order. Thanks very much to Frictitious for sponsoring the show. Let's get back to the video.
Okay, cool. Right, let's get started on this 5C, which I bet is harder than it looks.
In this shot, I'm about to lead this lovely 5C that actually has some really interesting, easy climbing. But wow, look at the height of that first bolt.
Like I'm probably, what, 4 metres off the ground? Something like that? And if you came here and you didn't have a clip stick, that could be quite scary, you know?
Now this is a particularly egregious example, but that is definitely a trip to the hospital if this goes wrong. And this sort of height for the first bolt at low grade routes is reasonably common. Yes, the start is easy, but soloing 5 metres as a beginner leader is a daunting thought.
Alright, so now I'm up on this ledge here, and there's no other word for the move that I just did at 5C other than sandbagged.
I can't be the only one who feels this way. The really low grades, when you're really starting out, they feel really, really sandbagged. Like the 3 plus feels like 6A, the 5C feels like a 6A, the 5C plus feels like 6A. 6A is the lowest grade, right? As I progress the climb, you can see that there are sections that are quite run out. And from the bolter's perspective, it's completely understandable. The climbing on these sections is verging on scrambling. There's massive ledges to retreat back to.
I guess it would be pretty superfluous to put one there.
However, for new climbers, or at least for me around a year or two ago, going above the bolt, regardless of the difficulty of the terrain, when I was really new to climbing, was very scary.
It's too hard and I'm too scared.
A few moves above the bolt was tolerable, but having my feet 2 metres above the last protection was absolutely terrifying. I don't actually think it's the difficulty of the climbing that makes beginners frightened, but rather the thought of what would happen if they did fall. As new climbers, your brain is telling you when you go above the protection, you are not supposed to be here, and it takes a long time to develop that sense of, okay, I'm in control here, I'm protecting myself with my climbing skills. Confidence, basically. So an extra bolt here might be superfluous, but for a new climber, a bolt here changes it from what feels like basically a free solo to something that feels exciting, but also safe and doable. Also, look at these ledges.
My feet are above my last straw, and the next straw's up there. So I really wouldn't want to fall like from that section onto this ledge. It looks reasonably easy, but it doesn't change the fact that it's kind of a no-fall situation, you know?
These easy, low-grade, ledgy climbs, when I was starting leading, they would look inviting, you know, a big ledge where you can almost sit on it. But when you're on the lead, even with a really good belayer and really dense bolting, it can be really hard if you do fall to not bounce off that ledge. And when you just go just above it and the move is a little bit sketchy, it can be really, really scary. Ledgy climbing, I do not enjoy it at all. What I thought would be interesting to illustrate my point was to compare this 5C with a much steeper climb round the corner at the same crag, but 9 grades harder.
It's the 7A plus I'm on now, so obviously it is like way, way harder than the 5C. But if you look at how densely it's bolted, like look at these two, I can touch both of these bolts with one arm. I could practically clip that and clip that, and I might even be able to clip that.
Both these climbs are 18 metres. The 7A Plus has 9 bolts, the 5C has 7 bolts. And that almost seems counterintuitive. The grade is 9 grades harder, but has more bolts. Naively, you would think, for the harder climbers, they would require less bolts, but actually the harder the climbs, more often than not, have even more bolts on them. And just look at the falls you take. Because there's more bolts and because it's so steep there's no ledges, you can take really nice, soft falls into thin air. Your B layer can give you a really soft catch, so you might actually travel a long way down, but that really reduces the impact of you slamming into the wall and the sort of the impact you get, around your back and your hips and stuff when you fall hard.
That was a proper burn. That was awesome. I emptied the tank all the way and left nothing on the wall there. Feels good to try that hard. And the only reason I can do that is because the falls are so good, because there's nothing below me.
So what am I trying to say here? What's my point? Should we all start climbing at 7A plus? Should everything we bolt be a total bolt ladder? Should we add bolts to existing classics? No, I'm not saying any of that. Even I've climbed routes that I thought had too many bolts on, and I'm certainly not suggesting that we add bolts to existing classic climbs. In fact, even suggesting adding a bolt in the UK is actually blasphemous, and you must be condemned by the entire climbing community if you even hint at that. Additionally, I'm certainly not criticising bolters and their choices in bolting. These people have more often than not invested their own funds into routes that are probably well below their limit, and not to mention a huge amount of time that they have spent finding the crag, cleaning the crag and development so that we have these fantastic routes to climb. I'm not criticising bolters. Instead, what I'm offering is advice to my former self, a green, inexperienced climber who wants to try climbing on real rock and wants to be leading routes. And that advice is try leading a harder grade. If you're a nervous leader, try and avoid low grade, run out, ledgy climbs. Try finding something slightly steeper and a couple of grades harder, like a 6A plus or 6B grade with more dense bolting. So 2 years ago, I couldn't actually even climb 6B, so why would I suggest starting at that grade? Well, it is way easier to learn to lead climb when it is safe to fall. At 6B, if you're a beginner, unless you're a prodigy, you are going to fall. It's really good practice to take safe, unobstructed, clean falls that are soft into thin air. The whole game in sport climbing is climbing and falling, and then just 1 out of 20 attempts actually clipping the chains. And it doesn't have to be this horrifying experience that feels like a free solo. And at 6A plus and above, the bolting is almost always a bit friendlier. Almost.
Well, it was alright. Don't like it.
By the way, if you are a nervy leader and you want to find out if the bolts are quite spaced apart, then you can take the height of the climb in metres and divide it by the number of bolts. So we're looking for 1 bolt for every 2 to 3 metres. If you're getting numbers like 4 or 5, so 5 metres between bolts, that is massively run out, and if you're nervy, maybe avoid that one. That doesn't necessarily mean it's unsafe, it just means if you do fall, you're going to go for a ride. Also, just to note, stuff like this, that's clipstick material. That first bolt, if you're a beginner, absolutely get a clipstick in on that. There's no need to break your ankles when you're sport climbing. There's no points for being a hero here. I think this is the way forward for people who are wanting to get into sport climbing, who are wanting to experience leading on rock. These people, let's not spook them off. Let's not scare them to the point where they don't come back. We need to bring people into the sport. So let's gently introduce them to leading and show them that falling can be safe and it can feel okay. We just have to pick the right route for them at that point. Obviously, This is hyper subjective talk. So I would be interested if you're a beginner or if you're a coach or if you're really, really experienced. Do you agree with me that like the slightly harder, steeper grades are actually more suitable for new leaders? Or am I just talking crazy here? As always, let me know what you think in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed this video, found it insightful in some way. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.
I love this route. It's like the best route ever.